Thank you. Welcome to everybody, to councillors and officers to tonight's OCM being held on Monday, the 11th of April 2022. I declare this meeting open at 7:01 p.m. I would like to acknowledge that the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale is located on the traditional land of the Noongar people, and we pay our respects to the traditional owners, elders past, present and emerging. Item 1 on tonight's agenda is attendances and apologies. I will actually go through and do a roll call. Councillor Atwell, are you present?
Yes, present, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Bias?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Coles?
Yeah, evening, Michelle. Evening, all.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Duggan?
Present, thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
Present, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Strange?
Present, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Strawtons?
Good evening, Madam President and everyone else.
Thank you. Mr. Martin?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Ms. Sartich?
Good evening. I'm here. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Mr. Trossick?
I'm here. Good evening, Madam President. Good evening, elected members.
Thank you. Mr. Sullivan?
Present, thank you, Madam President.
Reza, I'm going to apologise from the very start. Mr. Jaffarez?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Dr. Parker?
I'm here. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Miss Gibson?
I'm here. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. As part of the attendances and apologies, I would like a mover and a seconder for the motion, which I will read, that Council under clause 18.1 of the Standing Orders Local Law 2002 as amended resolves to suspend for the duration of the meeting the following clauses. Clause 3.5, public question time insofar as it relates to public statements. Clause 3.13, deputations. Clause 8.2, members to occupy own seats. Can I please have a mover for this motion?
Madam President, Councillor Stroughton's here. I move that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Stroughton's. Councillor Atwell, are you happy to second?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Mr. Martin, are you happy to accept that as a motion moved unanimously?
Yes, Madam President. No one's objecting.
Thank you. Motion is moved unanimously. Given that we are conducting an electronic meeting this evening, I would just like to go through some meeting procedures. The conduct from the policy quoting Walga's guidance material, you may wish to remind everyone of the following, which I am going to do now. The pace of an e-meeting should be slow and orderly. The following practices will help avoid confusion and support effective e-meetings. We will speak clearly and slowly as connections may be distorted or delayed. Always state your name to indicate to the presiding member that you wish to speak. Restate your name if the presiding member has not heard you at first. In debate, only speak after the presiding member has acknowledged you, then state your name so that others know who is speaking. Follow the presiding member's directions and rulings. If you are unclear about what is happening in an e-meeting, immediately state your name to draw the presiding member's attention and enable you to then seek clarification from the presiding member. Avoid looking for opportunities to call points of order. Instead, politely and respectfully gain the presiding member's attention and explain any deviation from your meeting procedures, the Local Government Act, or any other relevant matter. Participating electronically in a meeting, whether that meeting is electronic or a physical meeting, presents logistical challenges and can impact the effective conduct of the meeting. An electronic meeting is as effective as the worst connection to the meeting. In addition to the behavioural protocols above, participants should ensure that they have a stable connection to the meeting and are able to give the meeting their full and proper attention. To ensure the best connection possible, meeting participants are requested to turn off their camera and mute their microphone when not speaking. Regaining order in the event of technical difficulties. Under clause 15.9 of the Standing Orders Local Law 2002, the presiding member may adjourn a meeting to regain order. This provision can be used to regain order in the event of technical difficulties. 15.9, right of the person presiding to adjourn without explanation to regain order. 1. If a meeting ceases to operate in an orderly manner, the person presiding may use discretion to adjourn the meeting for a period of up to 15 minutes without explanation for the purpose of regaining order. This action cannot be challenged by any other councillor or member. Upon resumption, debate is to continue at the point at which the meeting was adjourned. If at any one meeting the person presiding has cause to further adjourn the meeting, such adjournment may be to a later time on the same day or to any other day. 2. Where debate of a motion is interrupted by an adjournment under subclause 1 in the case of a council meeting, A. The names of members who have spoken in the matter prior to the adjournment are to be recorded, and B. The provisions of clause 9.5 apply when the debate is resumed. Voting. The presiding member will ask if there is any member opposed and pause. If there is no member opposed, the item is passed unanimously. Where an item has been debated, the voting method shall be by each member participating electronically, being called by the presiding member in alphabetical order by surname, except for the presiding member, who is in sequence to state whether they are for or against the motion being put forward. After the councillors' votes are stated, the presiding member will also state their vote. Members in alphabetical order are Councillor Atwell, Bias, Coles, D'Agostino, Duggan, Singh, Strange, Straughtons, and myself, Rich. Thank you to everybody. We'll now move to item 2, which is public questions. There has been one public question, 2 statements, and a deputation circulated to councillors before tonight's meeting, or 2 deputations. 3 deputations that have been sent around to councillors for you to read before tonight's meeting. Is there any questions from councillors arising from the statements or the deputations? Councillor Coles, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam President. It's just a comment I'd like to make. I'd just like to thank the staff for providing me with a hard copy of those questions and the deputations. It was very useful. So I'd just like to thank the staff for that.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Item 5 is the President's report. I won't read it out. It will be contained in the minutes. We'll move to item 6, which is declarations of councillor and officers' interests. I have had a late declaration of interest come through from Councillor D'Agostino for item 10.1.3. It is a proximity interest as his daughter attends Court Grammar in pre-primary. Also have a declaration of interest from Councillor Gary Singh, declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.3. Final approval for shared use agreement, Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale and Court Grammar, as Councillor Singh's son attends Court Grammar School. And from Councillor Rob Coles has declared a financial interest in item 10.1.3. Final approval for shared use agreement, Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale and Court Grammar, as Councillor Coles is a board member of the Court Grammar School. The extent of the interest is financial. Councillor Coles is a board member and has an obligation to the running of the school, including financials. Item number 7 is confirmation of minutes of previous council meetings. 7.1 is ordinary council meeting held on the 21st of March 2022. Can I please have a mover to accept these minutes?
Councillor Singh, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Strange and Councillor Singh. Is there anybody opposed to these minutes? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 8 is receipt of minutes or reports and consideration of adoption of recommendations from committee meetings held since the previous council meeting, which there is nil. Item 9 is motions of which notice has been given, which we have one this evening. Item 9.1, notice of motion, councillor attendance register. I am happy to move this motion. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Coles. Is there anybody opposed to this motion?
Sorry, Madam President, I actually had a question.
Councillor Coles, can I please have a seconder for the motion before we move to questions? Councillor Atwell, are you happy to second?
Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Coles, question.
Yeah, thanks, Madam President. Apologies for interrupting the meeting with a question. I just had an opportunity to read this over the weekend, and my understanding is that we already have this as a policy, and that was from a meeting, I think, back in 2019. Am I correct in stating that the only difference to this is that it now will record workshops as well as ordinary council meetings, special council meetings and Q&A, so it's purely an addition of council workshops?
It is an addition of Q&A briefings for both ordinary and special council meetings, and the addition of councillor workshops for project briefings and councillor workshops for budget preparation.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, that's fine. And can I just ask, as the officer putting the motion forward, what's your intent behind doing this?
Visibility of decision making for our community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10 is Chief Executive Officer reports. 10.1 Development Service reports. 10.1.1 Proposed Equestrian Stable Development, Hay Shed, Mare Shed, Water Tank, Horse Shelters, Indoor Riding Arena and Tree Removal, Lot 728 Lowlands Road, Mardella. Councillor Coles.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Coles.
I'm happy to second. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. I have an amendment I would like to move to the motion that we have before us, in particular to condition D. I would like to see added to this condition that there is a vegetation belt planted and maintained along the southern boundary of the property. Could I please ask the director for some assistance with the wording, please?
Certainly, Madam President. I guess the initial question would be the width, because once we've got the width, we can look at modifying the first sentence to...
I think the screening belt, looking at the diagrams in the report, a 2 metre wide screening belt would suffice. There is 8 metres between the boundary and what is proposed as the yards. That would still leave a 6 metre area where a fire break could be installed.
Certainly. Well, I could look at recommending to address that request, the first sentence being modified after the word showing, putting a colon, then Roman numeral number 1. Yep, suitable nutrient stripping vegetation adjacent to or within the creek, and then semicolon. Roman numeral 2. I'd say replacement of lost trees. Semicolon after trees. Sorry, yeah, just semicolon after trees as opposed to colon, yeah. And then the word and after trees. Yep. And then Roman numeral number 3, a 2 metre wide vegetation strip along the full length of the southern property boundary.
Director, does it need to be stipulated the type of trees with understory?
If you wanted to, Madam President, it could state a 2 metre wide vegetation strip, then after the word strip, comprising tall trees and medium-sized shrubs, comma, along the full length of the southern property boundary, full stop.
Thank you, Director. Could I please have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Singh, you happy to second?
Just have a quick question. So is Councillor Coles moved the original motion and Councillor Duggan seconded that? So is it that we consider this as a amendment or a alternative motion? I can't work it out.
Amendment. It's an
Okay.
amendment to the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Can I please have a seconder for the amendment?
Happy to second.
Thank you,
Councillor Singh.
Councillor Singh. Is anybody opposed to the amendment? Councillor Atwell,
Madam President,
Councillor Atwell, you have your hand up.
Yes, I have just a little bit of a question. I probably should know this, but how long is that boundary? And I have a little bit of a problem with having large trees. I think medium shrubs are probably better because having, as you well know, I do fire breaks. Large trees become a large pain in the where if you're not careful. So I'm a little bit wary about asking them to plant large trees along so fairly close to the boundary because they spread out and fall down and make it a bit hard. And I'd also just like to know how long that boundary is or whether we need it along the entire length of it.
Director, would you have a length of what that boundary is?
Certainly, Madam President. I'm just locating that on our Intramap system as we speak. One moment.
Thank you.
That southern boundary is 525 metres long.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Duggan, you have a question?
Thanks, Councillor Rich. I'm actually opposed to the amendment. That's what my hand is up for. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Atwell.
Yeah, well, my question is, do we need to have, is it necessary to have it the full length of the boundary? And also, as I said, do you think it's necessary to have those large trees there? I've just got to, as I had said, I have a problem with the large trees. And also, do we, because I'm not sure what it's trying to be, I know he's trying to screen something, do we need to screen the entire boundary or not?
When you have a look at the diagram on page 14 of the agenda, that shows the proposed amendment with all of the yellow internal fence lines and the buildings that are proposed to be built. And the new driveway that has been put in actually accesses the property between the small yellow rectangles and the larger ones. And there is a property directly to the south with a house, which in further photos in the report, you can see what they're looking at straight from their front gate, basically into the property. The development is near on the full length of the south boundary. So if the south boundary wasn't planted, I don't know how you would screen the development that's there, Councillor Atwell. The larger trees, I believe there should be some larger trees for a canopy covering the shrubs with the middle story growth.
Just a question. Lowland, isn't that fronting Lowlands Road?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yep. Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. I was getting slightly confused myself. No, I'm not. Lowlands runs north. No, it doesn't. Yeah, sorry, I've got you. Yep. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino, you have a question?
Yeah, Madam President, I'm just trying to get my head around it because I think in the deputation, is it Mr. Blevin? Sorry,
Mr.
I'm just
Blevin?
swapping between bits and pieces. I thought the gist of what he was saying, I could have it wrong, was that he was concerned the stable, I'll just try and get his wording right, affected his vista and his outlook. I'm just trying to get my head around whether putting a whole belt of trees there isn't going to affect his vista and his outlook even more. Is that a concern or?
As part of the submissions, which all councillors have a copy of as part of the report in attachment 2, I think it is, and as part of the deputation or the statement made, there has been a verbal agreement between the neighbours. And if there is nothing within the council resolution to support that verbal agreement and it's not adhered to, there is no comeback on the arrangements made. My feeling is that this goes away to actually helping that.
Apologies, I'm not aware. So what verbal agreement is there?
Have you read the statement from both parties tonight or this afternoon, Councillor D'Agostino?
Yes, I have. And I noted they'd reached a consent. I'll get their wording. I don't know if it, let me just, so apologies. Let me just confirm the exact wording so we're on the same page.
In the statement from Mr. Blevin, it states, in the meantime, it has been verbally agreed to plant blocks of trees and bushes on the verge roadside opposite each shelter. This situation will then be reassessed to determine whether there is any change in vista of the house. If there remains a detriment to the vista of our home, we state that the stable needs to be relocated to a mutually agreed location.
Thanks, understood. But isn't what you're proposing something materially different to what the parties have actually agreed themselves?
When you have a look at the diagrams that have been provided as part of the report, the development is
Yeah,
I'm
looking at page 14, yep.
Is not that far short of the full length of that boundary. And then when you look at the photographs that have been provided on page 16 to the size and scale of the arena building, it is quite a substantial building. Councillor Coles, you have a question?
No, sorry, Madam President. I was just indicating my desire to oppose the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Coles.
Sorry, Madam President, one last question, just so I'm getting my head around it. So, and I'm just trying to understand how from a fire break perspective this will work. So, like on the picture there obviously looks like there's lots of trees on the road. And then are you envisaging there'll be a gap and then this row of trees that you're proposing? Is that right?
On the diagram on page 11 of the agenda, there is a proposed site plan of the proposed development. And it shows at the narrowest part between the development and the boundary fence an area of 8 metres. I would propose that the line of shrubs or tree line would be closest to the boundary, which still allows a 6 metre area for a fire break to be constructed. And on the east side of the driveway, there is a 20 metre area between the boundary fence and the proposed development.
Thank you. And just my recollection, and I understand that the widths vary sometimes. Sometimes 8 metres is preferred as a minimum distance for fire breaks, Director. Or is it generally 6 metres as the minimum?
Thank you for the question. Fire control notice states 3 metre wide by 4.5 metre high corridor. We do ask where the fire break turns corners, given the appliances and some of the larger appliances aren't as removable, that they're enlarged. But in terms of minimum width, 3 metre wide fire break is what our fire control notice prescribes.
Thank you.
Councillor D'Agostino, do you have another question?
Sorry, Madam President, I don't think so. No, I'll put my hand down.
Thank you. Given we have councillors have indicated that they would like to speak against the amendment to this motion, I will open debate. We have heard from both the proponent of this development and from the neighbour directly to the south, and the proposed development does constitute quite a large development and change to the amenity of the area. We have had items come to council before where there has been verbal communication between various parties and nothing that has actually been put into the council resolution to help uphold those verbal agreements. What I have proposed in this amendment to the recommendation is that there is a section added so that the agreement that has been put forward and has been voiced by the neighbour directly to the south does have some kind of compliance action if it is not adhered to, given how close their house is to the proposed development that we see in this application. Councillor Singh, would you like to speak or reserve?
I will say a few words. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, I think I support the amendment based on your recommendation of the other neighbor is in the close proximity of this proposed development. And by doing these, by imposing these conditions, we are maintaining any trees that have been lost. So we are asking for replacement of any lost trees, and we are fire break compliance. So we are not breaching any local laws or anything. So I fully support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duggan, would you like to speak against?
Thanks a lot, Madam President. Thanks for your explanation of why you've put forward this amendment this evening. I guess I come from a practical sense as well as sort of an aesthetic sense. The road itself there is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know whether anyone's gone for a drive down there, but I went for a drive down this week. And there's already a significant number of roadside trees that are present there that would provide a fairly good covering for protection from lights and so forth. And I do understand that there is concern about the large roof space over the arena area. I think, though, that with it being a through space, so there's no walls on that shed over that, underneath that roof space, it doesn't have a severe impact on the view from for Mr. and Mrs. Blevin, although I can understand that they have a beautiful part of the world, and change is certainly always quite fear-inducing. I know Councillor Singh's made reference to the trees. It is already written in that there will be over 100 trees planted, and that will include protection of the creek that runs through the block. My concern when I talk about the practicalities is that how are these people going to access their boundary fence for repairs of the fence if they've got trees lined on the roadside, which, like I said, I've driven past there and they are quite significant trees and they are beautiful trees. And then we have understory, small shrubs, large trees that are all planted right on the fence line. I'm not sure how we expect the proponents to actually be able to get in to be able to do any repairs on their boundary fences. So that to me is a very practical reason why I had to view this amendment with some discouragement. I also, for my last point, I want to make a commendation to both the proponent and the neighbour, because it sounds like they've got together and done what we want neighbours to do, had a good chat and sorted it out amongst themselves. Sometimes I think that we can get ourselves involved in things that perhaps can sort themselves out, and it sounds to me like this is one of those very fine examples where the neighbours have actually resolved an issue, and I'm sure with ongoing discussions between them, if they've managed to bring this situation to the point that there was originally a complaint which has now been resolved without council involvement, I'm sure in future that they can sort this issue too. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor D'Agostino, do you have a question?
Madam President, I just was wondering, and I understand the sentiment of what you're trying to achieve. I'm just trying to reconcile that against what's actually written here and wondering if you'd consider a slight amendment to what you're proposing.
And what would that be, Councillor D'Agostino?
In their proposal, gee, sorry, my eyesight is getting the better of me. Sorry, apologies. In the meantime, it has been verbally agreed to plant blocks of trees and bushes on the verge roadside opposite each shelter. The situation will then be reassessed. Would you consider amending your resolution to capture exactly what the parties have agreed, which it says, and just, yeah, to repeat, verbally agreed to plant blocks of trees on the bushes on the verge roadside opposite each shelter. So I presume, and I'm just guessing, and the director can confirm, most shelters would be, I don't know, 3 metres wide. So I think there's 4 shelters, so there'd be 4 blocks of 3 metres of trees, which seems to be the party's intentions. Would you consider an amendment along those lines?
No, I wouldn't, Councillor D'Agostino, for the reason that they've proposed to plant them in the road verge, which would then make them the responsibility of maintenance of the Shire.
Okay, apologies. So if we were to sort of transpose that and put them 4 times 3 metres in the same spot, but in the property exactly as you've proposed.
When you look at the diagram on page 14, what you're proposing is to have 3 blocks of trees, 3 or 4 metres wide, along a 125 metre boundary with the substantial development that is being proposed.
Apologies, it's not me that's proposed. Well, I'm proposing the amendment, but I'm doing it on directly using the wording that the parties have put in writing.
No, I'm not prepared to amend in that way, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor D'Agostino, if you have no further questions, can you please take your hand down? Thank you. Is there any councillors that would like to speak for the motion? I don't feel there's much more I can actually add to the debate in the closing. I've stated my reasons for putting the amendment forward. And
sorry, Madam President, on amendments, there's no actual right of reply by the
sorry.
mover. So
Thank you.
The amendment just needs to be considered by the council and voted on.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell, are you for or against the amendment?
Against the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Bias?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Coles?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Duggan?
Against, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
For the motion. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Strange?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Straughtons?
Against, Madam President.
Thank you. My vote is for the motion. Motion is lost 4-5. Thank you. We will return to the substantive motion. Is there anybody opposed to the substantive motion? I am opposed to it. Councillor Coles, would you like to open debate, please?
Hey, thanks, Madam President, for the opportunity to speak. Look, very salient points have already been made, but what I would say is a couple of things. One is, and I don't have the opportunity to be, or have the opportunity, but unfortunately I'm not involved in the equine consultative group. But suffice to say, I'm aware that it is one of the focuses of this Shire is the equine industry, and I certainly commend the work that we've done in that space. Quite simply, I think the officer's recommendation is solid. On page 15 of the agenda, it talks about some concerns about screening, and it says whether adequate screening exists or has been proposed from the road and or neighbouring properties. And the answer to that is mature vegetation is located along the streetscape and the eastern lot boundary, providing screening. Although it would not render the development invisible due to its rural nature, it is not considered to have an adverse impact or require further screening. And certainly that's the comments from the officers, and I would certainly agree and commend those comments. I think the other thing too is the alternate motion, whilst I understand the intent behind it, and I think it does have some merit, what I'll be concerned about is almost too onerous for the applicant to do extra landscaping, and I think there's 500 and something metres of landscaping, which I think is far too onerous. There is already a condition on the officer's recommendation, which I had the opportunity to move, and that is paragraph D, where it talks about landscaping plans should be submitted to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale, showing suitable stripping vegetation. I think that allays the concerns that have already been mentioned. So I would commend the officer's recommendation to my fellow councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Duggan, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll speak. Thanks, Madam President. Firstly, thanks, Councillor Coles. You've just totally stolen my thunder. Basically, everything I'd written down, you have already commented on. I think that I'd just like to add that this approval is requesting for 30 horses. All three zones are significantly understocked when we look at the guidelines that we base that on, which is the stocking rate guidelines for rural small land holdings. that means a lot to me because my concern is always about erosion. And so I know that with the DEWA irrigation already application being approved and in place, that this is a piece of land in our shire that is going to be supporting our equine community, is going to be well maintained because of the DEWA approvals and the irrigation. It's going to be understocked compared to what it's allowed. It's got a creek area that's been fenced off, so that's well protected. The actual buildings themselves, I understand, as I said before, that there may be concerns for the large roof space, but a majority of that roof space is actually will be seen from the air, of course, but from the ground, I think it looks absolutely beautiful. It's wall-less, and I don't think that it has a great visual impact, other than the fact that it reflects what we want our shire to be. We want it to be a forward-moving, progressive, equine and resilient shire that welcomes people with great plans. And according to the email that was sent to us by the proponents, you know, this has got the opportunity to put our shire on the map because have got these horses that are amazing horses. So I commend Rob on what he said, and I can only add my 20 cents to it as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please remind councillors that when they are in an official meeting of the Shire to use the official titles of other councillors instead of first names? Thank you.
Yes, my apologies, Madam President. As soon as I said that, I thought that was a mistake.
Thank you. I have indicated that I will speak against this motion, and it's not for the sake of the actual development on this property. Some of the points that have been raised by both Councillor Coles and Councillor Duggan are extremely valid points. There is other points where I think they have actually missed the mark. In relation to component D of the officer's recommendation, it reads, prior to issue of a building permit for the development, a landscaping plan shall be submitted to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale showing suitable nutrient stripping vegetation adjacent to or within the creek to replace the lost trees. When you look at the map, the overhead maps and the diagram of the property, the creek runs basically east to west and is situated more towards the centre of the property. So any planting in that area is not going to give a better amenity to neighbours of the property. Also, when you have a look on page 16 of the agenda of the sample photo to allow councillors to see the size and scale of what the undercover area is, it looks quite beautiful. It has a backdrop of trees in the photograph that's been supplied. When you have a look at the aerial map and the proposed site plan that has been supplied of the location on the property of where that is to the covered arena is to be located, there is no backdrop of trees to that development. There is a stand of trees to the east of it, and there is trees along the road verge. There is no other vegetation of any substantive growth on the property. So I don't have an issue with the actual development as it stands, except for the lack of vegetation and the lack of amenity provided for the neighbouring properties that surround this. We have had it come to council before where there has been verbal agreements, and even councillors as part of their debate have said that, oh, the proponent is prepared to do this, this and this, but it is not part of the council resolution, and there is nothing to hold that verbal agreement to that in place, especially for the neighbouring properties around it. If that had have been in place, I could have supported this development wholeheartedly. But I think as much as we like to have these developments in the Shire, we also have to take into consideration the neighbouring properties and what these developments bring to the areas where they are for those neighbouring properties that also live in these areas. And I think that as a council, we should be able to do better than what we are in this space. Thank you. Anybody else that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Coles, would you like to close, please?
Thank you, Madam President. Just quickly in relation to a couple of points that have been mentioned, I guess when we look at planning, and I often say that planning for me is a bit of a dark art or black magic, and I'm still trying to get my head around it after 5 years. But I guess it comes back to the land use, and certainly the stable use is defined under the Town Planning Scheme number 2 as any land, building or structure used for the housing, keeping and feeding of horses, and that includes mules and associated incidental activities. It is a allowed use in the rural zone, and that is that the use is permitted provided it complies with the relevant standards and requirements laid down in the scheme and any conditions opposed or imposed by the council in granting planning consent. So, and I think the comments that have been made both for and against are all valid. And I guess that's the good thing about councillors having different opinions and different positions, that we can have a wholehearted and respected debate, which I think we've achieved tonight. In closing, I would say that condition D, the landscaping plan, notwithstanding some other comments, I think that satisfies the concerns, and this is a use, equestrian use, stables use, which is allowed within Town Planning Scheme. It's not as if this is a use that's not accepted or is a discretionary use. This is actually permitted use. I think that's key to this. So any concerns are allayed by paragraph D or condition D, which is the landscaping plan. So I would ask that this goes to the vote, and I commend this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Atwell, are you for or against the motion?
For the motion, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Bias?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Coles?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Duggan?
For the motion. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
For the motion. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Strange?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Straughtons?
For the motion, Madam President.
Thank you. My vote is against. Thank you. Motion is carried 8-1.
Can we have the votes recorded, please, Madam President? It's Councillor Duggan here.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Minute Secretary, can we please have the votes recorded? Councillor Bias?
Thank you, Madam President. While that's being recorded, I'd like a question to the CEO, if I may.
Yes, please.
Can the CEO please point me to where in standing orders the mover and amendment doesn't get a right of reply? My memory is that it's if the mover of the substantive motion speaks to an amendment, they forfeit their right of reply on the substantive motion, but I can't recall an instance where the mover of an amendment wouldn't be able to exercise their right of reply.
Thank you, Councillor Bias.
I can assist if you wish.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Parker.
Okay, I'll refer the councillor to section 10.21 of the standing orders right of right provisions, which states that the mover of any amendment does not have a right of reply, point C in 10.2.1.
Lovely. Thank you, Dr. Parker. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Bias.
Madam President, before you progress with item 10.1.2, can I just remind councillors there's a couple of typographical errors that we are hoping to change. And so when you've called out the heading before you call for movers and seconders, can we just do that, please?
Yes, thank you. So item 10.1.2, proposed change of use showroom to health studio, lot 3, 821 South Western Highway, Byford. Mr. Martin, would you like to please?
Thank you, Madam President. On page, make a sticky note here, on page 39, the cash in lieu calculations currently says $350. It should say $250. And in the officer's recommendation, the dates in point A say 13th of October 2022. It should be 13th of October 2021 on both occasions. They are changed on the screen there. I just wanted to make councillors aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Councillor Strange, you had your hand up. Councillor Strange.
Sorry, technical malfunction there. I just wanted to point out on page 23, there's also reference to that October date as 2022.
Thank you, Councillor Strange.
Oh, thank you.
Can I please have a mover for this motion?
Madam President, it's Councillor Coles. I'd like to move my alternate motion that I circulated this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Is there a seconder for?
Councillor Duggan here. I'm happy to second the alternate motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there anybody opposed to this alternate motion?
Madam President, can we give a chance for the Minute Secretary to get it on the screen, please?
Yep, sorry.
And Councillor Coles, are you happy if we change the date there to 2021 rather than 22?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. C.
date.
I was going to suggest that. Sorry, it was my cutting and pasting. So,
thank you. That's okay.
Thank you, Minute Secretary. Is there anybody opposed to this motion?
Councillor Singh opposed the motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell, you're opposed to the motion?
I have a question.
Yes, Councillor.
I just wonder where did the 3,000, where did the one bay come from? The 3,750. How does it? What is the rationale for that figure? And also, does that comply with the town planning scheme?
Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Councillor Coles.
oh, thanks, Madam President. To answer that question, that's what the proponent, Ms. McCormack, suggested. They're the funds that she has left over, and that was a sign of goodwill for her to put that $3,750 in towards a single car bay.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Could I please ask the Director whether this complies with the town planning scheme?
Thank you, Madam President. The condition essentially reduces from 12 to one bay, so there would be essentially that deficit in parking. So based on the amendment, council would be essentially considering a provision of a total of 5 bays versus the town planning scheme requirement of 16 bays.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Coles, would you like to open debate, please?
Yeah, thanks, Madam President. And I guess it's not about me. It's never about me in this place. But what I would say is this has been one of the toughest motions or items that have come before me in the last 4 and a bit, nearly 5 years. To say I've had sleepless nights about this is not an exaggeration. And I guess, as I have said before, it's a balance between what I'm here to do as an elected representative against what the community wishes and community wants, and what the town planning scheme, policy, and the planning proper order and planning. So I guess for me that's the scales, and I guess it's like the scales of justice. An ideal situation is we work within the planning framework and we come up with a solution and a decision that is suitable to the ratepayers and the community as a whole. And I guess for me, I will go with the latter on this one, and that is I've put my decision based on what is good for the community and what is good for the ratepayer. Now, I guess that's the introductory comment that we need to set the scene. So I guess the first thing is this comes down to a change of use from a showroom to a health facility. And obviously a dance studio comes under that latter use, which is the health studio. Now, I think the important thing I'll make from the outset here is this cash in lieu for parking is discretionary. And I'll say that again, councillors, it is discretionary. I've done quite a bit of research over the last week or so on this, and I think it's fair to say I got quite emotional talking about this last Monday. And I certainly won't go any further with that. But certainly we need to understand this is not something that we have to do. This is something that is discretionary. And the reality is this proponent could quite simply walk away. The proponent could walk away and there could be another use for that showroom, which becomes a showroom. So the parking won't get fixed, and the $45,000 cash grab, and I think that's a fair comment to make, this is a cash grab of $45,000. Won't happen. So I think there are a couple of key things we need to use from the outset. I'm also concerned somewhat, councillors, there's actually no plan or no actual agreement for the parking up front. My understanding is there's already parking along George Street. In actual fact, I use that myself. Now, the issue with the parking is that the parking's there, but it's not formal. And I use that sense formal in terms of the parking is not sealed. There is still off-street parking there that people use. The other thing which is really critical here, councillors, and I neglected to mention this last Monday at the Q&A, but what I would do is ask my fellow councillors to have a look at the survey that the proponent paid. I think it was $13,000 each time for the surveys of the parking. And lo and behold, the parking surveys, both surveys that were completed, one was during the school holidays and one was outside of school holidays, both of those surveys, the end result is, and I look at page 35, the survey suggests that there is sufficient parking in the locality on site and on the street to service the development. I say again, the survey suggests that there is sufficient parking in the locality on site and on street to service the development. Okay, now it talks there about the officer's concerns about informal bays, but at the end of the day, it's quite clear. It's unequivocal that there are enough parking bays for this facility in this locality. Now, that's just not a one-off. That was also done on page 33, where they did the survey during school holidays. Based on the findings of the survey, the report concludes that there is sufficient parking bays available on site and within the immediate surrounding area to accommodate the parking requirements for the proposed development. Okay, so let's objectively look at this. We've got someone, a small business operator, who has decided to put her business in the Shire, notwithstanding the history here from the Byford Hall to Baker Hall. Baker Hall was not suitable, so now she's gone out as a commercial entity and tried to find a suitable facility. She's done that. Now, I would submit to all councillors, we have a duty to our community. We have a duty to our ratepayers. We have a duty to our small businesses. We should do all that we can to support small businesses, to support our residents, to support our ratepayers. And it certainly wasn't lost to me, councillors, the very impassionate video that Ms McCormack sent to all councillors last night. a Sunday night where she sat down, poured out her heart to all councillors, has appealed to us to look at the responsibility we have as elected representatives and listen to the community. Okay, so the other side, of course, is a planning part. As I said, the cash in lieu for parking is discretionary. As I said, I've done significant research in this, and the other time that a cash in lieu has been used within that area and within the Shire since I've been an elected representative was the facility which is the gym and the indoor swimming pool, which I think was just further to the north on Southwest Highway. The fundamental difference here, councillors, is that was a cash in lieu at the initial development stage. That was a piece of infrastructure that hadn't been built, the planning stages. The applicants, proponents understood there was a shortfall in the parking and were happy at the construction phase to put the cash in lieu for parking. This, councillors, is completely different. This is comparing apples with oranges. This is a facility, a shop front already located within another 7 shops where the person has gone in good faith to hire out this facility to use it as a health studio for dance lessons. That is comparing apples with oranges. So again, I did some more research, and it's not unusual for this, but this normally happens, and I think the examples I found was in the cities of Vincent and the city of Cambridge. Now, one particular example there was a medical practice where their rent and what their turnover was a significant amount of money. It was in excess of millions of dollars each year. The medical facility in this instance had to pay $250,000 in lieu of parking. $250,000, $250,000, which in their turnover was negligible. They were happy to do it. Let's turn our mind back now to what we have in front of us. We have a small business operator, a small business owner who is trying to do the right things by mums and dads, by children in the area, for children to learn how to dance, to help with mental health, to help people be active, to be fit, for well-being in the Shire. And here we are asking her to pay $45,000. I don't know how much she's going to charge for the 28 students for each class or 35 students in each class, but heaven forbid, I would imagine it's going to take her a long time to recoup the $45,000. As I said, we need to be fair, we need to be reasonable. The concern I have, apart from everything else I've said, is what happens after 12 months if this facility doesn't work for her. She decides that she hasn't got enough turnover. She has to walk away. She's paid $45,000 for extra bays that aren't exclusive use. They're not exclusive use for the Rise Dance Studio. They're for use for anyone. The Dome, Genesis, the Tattoo Parlour, F45. The other thing I think is really important to note, and I'm not too sure how many of my fellow councillors are aware of this, but the saddle shop that's located between F45 and next door to this proponent's business is actually becoming vacant. Now, that's obviously only a short-term solution, but there will be more car bays available because the saddle shop will not be used. In closing, what I would say is the key thing, this is a drop-off and pick-up facility. Mums and dads will be dropping their children off. There'll be carpooling. There'll be students walking from schools. There'll be students walking from other areas to that facility. It's not the case that there'll be 38 cars parked out the front of that studio, 35 cars, while the facilities, while the classes are being run. Drop off, carpooling. That in itself is a pertinent point. And interestingly, I'll leave all council with this thought before I close. And that is, how is that different to a school where mums and dads drop their children off? I was only at an Anzac service at West Byford last week. 900 and something children they have at that school. Do they need to have 900 car bays? Do they need to have 900 car bays at West Byford? Because that's how many students there are at that school. Let's apply some common sense. Let's listen to our community. Let's listen to our ratepayers. And on that, there was actually no objections. No objections to this facility in that shop. No objections, no concerns about car parking. Councillors, please listen to the community. Please support a small business. I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Duggan, would you like to speak or reserve?
I'll speak. Thanks, Madam President. I'd like to start by commenting on the town planning scheme too, with the requirement to have 16 bays. once again, we come back to the thing that that was allowed for an adult centre where people pull in, they park their car, they go in and do their workout, they have a chat afterwards, they come out. That bay has been used for the entire hour that they are on site. With kids' dance studios, it's the exact opposite of that. Parents are strongly dissuaded from actually being on site. So it's a kiss and drop. I know from when my own daughter was doing dancing, you get them out of the car, you make sure they got their shoes, you make sure they got their drink bottle, you get to the door, you are greeted at the door by the dance instructor who says, "Thanks very much, Mum, see you later," and they send you on their way. The best thing about that is you're in a car parking bay for 1 or maybe 2 minutes, and then you go off elsewhere. And I must say, for the surrounding businesses, they would probably not only not be against this, but they would be all for it, because where do mums go afterwards? They go and grab a coffee at Dome, or they'll go and grab dinner from one of the takeout places nearby. I think that, this whole concept that we need the 16 bays, I can see where that would be required for an adult centre, but certainly for a kids' health centre, I can't see that as being as relevant. I think also getting back to the whole concept of the single bay allowance, this is purely formalising what is already used as informal parking. So people are already parking on that area. It's just what we're looking at doing now is putting some bitumen down, making some formal lined bays and putting cars on exactly the same place. We're actually not creating more land for parking. So perhaps if we do those tiny little bays where everyone's door smacks into somebody else's as you try and get in and out, they might be able to fit in maybe another 1 bay or maybe 2 bays. So that to me is why perhaps, the payment of 1 bay is pertinent, because realistically, that is all that we are going to be adding to this. We are not adding another 5 bays. We're not adding 16 bays. We will be at most adding 1 bay. A rose by any other name is still a rose. That parking area is still a parking area, whether it's formalised or whether it's informal. It's still a parking area. It's still going to be a parking area. So by requesting $45,000 from this small business owner, not only do we run the risk of losing this service in our shire, because she will just take her business elsewhere, but I think also we as councillors need to look at what message this sends to other small business owners who are thinking about coming into our shire. Are we welcoming? Are we assisting? Are we saying we'll supply public parking on public land? Or are we saying you have to pay $45,000 for parking bays which will be on public land, which will probably get used more by the adult health facility in the building precinct rather than your own customers? I strongly feel on this, and I'm sure that you can pick that up in my voice as I speak tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor Singh, would you like to speak against the motion, please?
Thank you, Madam President, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. I respect Councillor Coles and Councillor Duggan's issues that been raised. I fully acknowledge that. This approval, I think, comes to the table. It's pretty hard to consider, but we need to work out both ways. So basically, to me, I'll start with the parking. Parking is the major issue within the local government area. It doesn't matter if it's the shire, if it's a city, or if it's a town. With the future developments coming on board, which is our Byford Town Centre coming soon, within next 4 to 5 years. I know the lease agreement is only for 3 years, but I'm not saying like the business owner will stop in 3 years. If she's going well from last 10 years, she'll keep continuing with the business. So I'll give you a prime example of the Coburn Gateways. When there was nothing there, and the parking was designed in a way um, that it doesn't accommodate the future needs. So what we have to consider here is we have to consider the future of our Shire. I know it's hard for her to pay $45,000, and it's not right. But what I'm trying, which point I'm coming from is we have a town planning scheme, and we have a formula which is based on a square meter plus base and the cost. There is a technicality involved in the back end, which we need to consider. I know the tenant condition. She don't have the money, or the business owner don't have the money, but we have to look at the income that she is generating, which is in the report. I think there's 372 students enrolled. If you go on their website, which is they're charging $115 per student per term. So there are 4 terms, which is equate to around 42,750 roughly per term, which equate to annual income of 171,120, which is fair, I think is enough to support or to pay their outgoings and to run the business successfully. When it comes to the area, I think I'll go back to Andrew when we go back to condition 1, because I'm going to foreshadow condition one with some amendments, because the requirement of the area has been changed as per Andrew's email on Friday, which is, I think the area being now 225 approximately, and if multiply by 15 into 10, so the condition should be not 45,000, can be reduced to 33,750, which is fair enough as per the town planning scheme formula. If you look at the vehicles that coming in and out of that tenancy or the parking base, they're saying students, 35 students, which is average student 10 to 20. If you take an average of 15 students per class, so basically if you're 15 cars coming in, 15 cars going out, because you're dropping and picking, because the classes are not staggered, they are 4:30 to 5:15, then 5:15 to 6, then it continues. So 75 minutes of traffic coming in and out of those bays. So there's a 5 minutes per car. By the time you park in your kid, you grab your kid or your son or daughter, you will be waiting there for like continuous movement of 75 minutes. So the parking issue I have already explained. Every Shire has suffered. Classes, Monday to Friday, 5 classes, which is roughly 5 slots of different classes. Weekends, there's 2 to 3 classes. So basically it's a 7 days operating business and 7 days of vehicular traffic. Which will go to the safety and security. We have to consider the pedestrian movement, because there's so many vehicles and there's so many other tenancies in and around that building. There's a dome there, and we have to abide by town planning requirements. And buy for time center coming on future, and if the lease extended to further years, how the Shire will be handled the future parking issues. So we have to consider the future as well. So the other thing is the 3,750, which Councillor Coles is putting forward as an amendment motion. I know it's in the deputation, and that's the money she has. Are we considering that? Are we opening the doors to other tenancies, that the way how the Shire operates? Because once this is approved, and because this is going to go in the public, it's on the website. So the other tenancies, the business will look at, let's put an application, and if there is they are asked for 45,000, and we said we have a $4,000 in the bank or $10,000. That's how the Shire operates. So it's put a bad reputation on the Shire. A town planning scheme is adopted by the Shire, and it's a law. So to me, I think it's a sort of a law we have to abide by. Will the decision change the tenant? Just coming from a different point, say example, if this is a McDonald's business or any multi-million-dollar, will we change that amount? because they will be easy to pay. I know it's a small business and it's hard to pay. The other thing I want to mention is the Shire officers. They are fully qualified, they are fully trained, they have done their due diligence. I think their qualification and experience, they have come to this formula which does the calculation. It's not made by someone else. It's the town planning scheme. That's how we operate. So I request the other councillors to please consider all the technicalities involved in the background. We have to follow the town planning scheme regulations. And the Shire have to work with the tenant to come to a mutual agreement. It's not, I'm not saying we come to a mutual agreement, but the formula with the decrease in the area, I think there's a requirement of roughly 10 bays now rather than 12. So we can reduce the bay numbers according to the area required, and we can reduce the amount. The other, I want to put some light on, if a builder, I'm just giving an example, if a builder puts a planning application for a 4x2 bedroom and there is a planning fees involved, I think we are doing the same. The use of the tenancy is changing. If it's a health studio, we're not asking for any money because the use of the building is changing. So we're going from a health studio to a dance studio, and there's a requirement need to be changed, and we are following the town planning scheme requirements. My son, I drop him to Bill Hicks Reserve every Sunday. I can see the issues already because people park on verge, people park on footpath, people park on blocking other people's driveway. The same situation is here. This is a commercial. I'm talking about the residential issue we are having in Bill Hicks Reserves. The problem we're going to have is later on, there's going to be so many parking issues and so many complaints coming in, and the Shire will be unable to handle those issues. So I'll request to foreshadow condition 1 with amendment of 10 bays as per the formula, if other councillors are happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. So you have foreshadowed to go back to the officer's recommendation with an amendment, is that right?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Bias?
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I would like to speak. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This has been a difficult item for me, and I'll confess that I am still quite conflicted on what the best outcome is. I don't often agree with Councillor Coles, but he is right that this is an item where we must be balanced. We must balance, excuse me, we must balance the needs of our ratepayers in reducing costs and ensuring appropriate spending of municipal funds. However, we must also care for our small businesses who have been doing it particularly rough with the state government's various COVID measures. I think the one thing that we can all agree on tonight, and I believe in finding common ground wherever we can, is that we all believe in an active and vibrant Byford city centre. We can support that as a local government by actually stepping back and letting businesses do what they do best. Care for their customers, generate foot traffic, and create an engaging and exciting city centre that our residents will want to come to and want to be a part of. I do believe that there is a middle ground we can achieve. It might be this motion or somewhere else in between, but we must have at the forefront of our mind what our shared goal is. And for me, that is an active and engaging Byford City Centre. So let's support small businesses, let's activate the city centre, and most of all, let's support a vibrant future for Byford. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Director, I have a question in regard to the amount of the payment that has been asked for in the officer's recommendation. My understanding from the Q&A when questions were asked of this item was that the $45,000 is only half of the amount needed to construct the 12 car parking bays, and that the other $45,000 needed for that construction would be paid for by ratepayers. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam President. So all local governments, as part of the recently introduced reforms specific to cash in lieu of parking, now must comply with the state imposed formula for how they determine the cash in lieu rate. And so if you look at page 36 of the agenda, I did attempt to illustrate that, because normally pre the recent changes, the formula would have read cost per square metre times 30 square metres times car parking space, with that 30 square metres being the typical amount of area that you need for a car parking plus its manoeuvring areas. So the 15 square metres that the state government have now pared back, it's relatively clear what they're trying to do. They're trying to encourage the cash in lieu funds to be invested in innovative ways. So no longer just simply car parking, but the reforms come with it additional opportunities to invest that money into improvements such as footpaths, such as shade trees, and the like. But if the recommendation as currently proposed was supported by council, the $45,000 would certainly not deliver 12 bays. What I've talked about on the following page is that the $45,000 on the bottom of page 39, the $45,000 would provide for the construction of bays. So unless council allocated further funds, the $45,000 would likely at best deliver around 6 additional bays. But that's certainly consistent with the planning framework and consistent with the rules that this development has been assessed according to.
Thank you, Director. Councillor D'Agostino, do you have a question?
Madam President, could I speak in favour of the motion, please?
We are looking for someone to speak against the motion at the moment. Councillor Atwell, do you have a question?
Yes. My question is very similar to the one I asked the other night. Is where I'm getting lost here is the person who's actually benefiting the most from this thing is the person who owns this facility. At no stage whatsoever have I seen any well, maybe there was an attempt, but surely there's some onus on the owner, and I may be totally wrong here, but is there not some onus on the owner to actually, if he's renting this place out as a certain facility, the onus should be on him to provide the necessary things that go with it.
Director, are you able to answer Councillor Atwell's question?
Certainly, Madam President. So as part of any application, whereas the landowner must endorse the application form, the applicant in this case is Rise Dance. So Algeri Planning on behalf of Rise Dance. So the applicant would be the one on the receipt of a condition like this, and then it's obviously for the applicant to determine how they fulfil that condition. Suffice to say, it would become back to, I guess, a tenant-landlord discussion, something that we're not privy to, nor would we get involved with. That would be a private matter. What we're focused upon is trying to protect the amenity of the area by avoiding the issues that we've discussed in terms of insufficient parking. And
thank you, Director. Is there anybody that would like to speak against this motion? I will speak against this motion. I have listened very closely to what Councillor Coles and Councillor Duggan put forward. And I've listened very carefully to the arguments that Councillor Singh has made. I did watch the video sent through by the proponent last night, and have also taken a phone call from her, as I'm sure a number of other councillors had over the last week or so. What strikes me is that every time we have a commercial development somewhere within our town centres, one of the biggest issues that we face is car parking. At the last couple of OCMs, we have had commercial developments knocked back when they have had an officer's recommendation to approve on traffic and car parking issues. So for the argument to support this small business and flash away the need for car parking in this area, I absolutely struggle to get my head around. We've heard the argument put forward that it is purely a kiss and drop, the same as what most childcare centres are, where you have a very small, limited amount of time where people are there dropping their kids at the facility. With this one, we have the potential for 35 students to be exiting at the same time the next 35 students are being dropped off. And we have the argument put forward that formalised car parking is not needed because we have unformalised car parking dealing with some of the most precious members of our community in our children, where we are happy to have them get out of cars in an unformalised parking area and crossing roads. I just don't see how this makes sense. Yes, it is a cost to the proponent. It is also a commercial business. Whether it is a small commercial business or a large commercial business, it is still a commercial business. If the commercial business is not the one paying, if the landowner is not the one paying, then that leaves the cost of providing parking for these businesses to be able to utilise falls to the ratepayers of our community, and to be able to provide 12 car parking bays, which are needed under our town planning scheme, at a cost of somewhere around $90,000. I don't think that that is a fair outcome for our community to cop the cost of that when they are looking at a commercial business utilising that funding. Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino, you'd like to speak for the motion?
No, that's okay, Madam President. I'll leave it now.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Bias, you've already spoken. Do you have a question?
I have already spoken, but I would like a question, if I may.
Yes.
Councillor Singh foreshadowed a motion, but it was an motion with an amendment, if I recall, but I can't recall what the amendment was. Can I get some clarity on that, please?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Singh, can you please clarify what the amendment to your foreshadowed motion would be?
Thanks, Madam President. Thanks, Councillor Boyce. Okay, if we look at the email that's sent by Andrew on Friday, the 8th of April, I think the question was raised by Councillor Strange about the lockable area within this the business premises. So I think in the email it says the total area we have is 247 square meters. With the lockable storage and admin area, which is not to be lockable storage area, they're saying not to be used by the users of the facility. So basically, we're coming up to about 226 square meters of usable area. So if we divide by that, I think there's a requirement of 15 car parking bays. Correct me if I'm wrong, Director Andrew, please. And if we have the 4.5 bays are already allocated, so if 15 bays requirement, I think if you subtract 15 and 4.5, we come to an agreement like roughly approximately requirement of 10 bays. Correct me if I'm wrong. So if we work on 10 bays instead of 12, so then we can work out the cost to the tenant is 225 into 15 square meters into 10 bays. Whatever the formula is, 250. Sorry, 250 into 15 into 10 bays. That's about 33,750, which is about roughly 10 grand less. That's what my amended motion will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Can I please remind all councillors when they are addressing others tonight to please use the councillor title or the director's titles during the evening. So Councillor Singh, your foreshadowed motion would be the officer's recommendation with the change to condition C to read, instead of the $45,000, to read $33,750. Is that right?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bias, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Atwell, do you have a question?
Yes, my question is, I don't know if Councillor Singh's mathematics are quite there. It should be, I believe, $250 per. Where is it?
Yes, yeah, 250. So sorry, I'm jumping in. Sorry, Madam President. So 250 into 15 into 10. So 33. Sorry, 250 into 15 into 10 is 37,500. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's 37,500. Thank you. Is there any other councillors who'd like to speak for the alternate motion we have in front of us? Councillor Coles, would you like to close, please?
Thanks, Madam President. Thank you for all councillors for a respected debate tonight. It is, as a couple of us have mentioned, quite a challenging motion that's come before council. Just a couple of points I'll make in closing, and that is the 5 years was put in there as an amendment because currently the proponent, Ms McCormick, has a 3-year lease with an option of another 2, which makes it 5 years, which I think is quite pertinent because we've heard some arguments tonight about you know, the Byford Town Centre, what's going to be happening. I think that 5 years is almost a good balance or a good way for us to look what's going to happen in the future. I would suggest in 5 years' time, the Byford Town Centre will hopefully be well and truly developed. There'll be certainly a good plan in place, if nothing else. The train station will be there. Hopefully, Part of that would be the elevated rail, and part of that, of course, would be some parking bays, which would come with a park and ride and something similar for the train station and the other parts of infrastructure within Byford. So that's why I put the alternative in there with that condition of 5 years, and that certainly will allay other councillors' concerns about what we're going to look like in the future. I think the key thing to look at here is what our job is as councillors, and I know we're all quite conversant with the Local Government Act of 1995, but if I may refer to that, and that is the duties of a councillor are to represent the interests of electors, ratepayers and residents, provide leadership and guidance to the community, facilitate communication between the community and the council. So we need to understand why we're here. It is a great honour, and with that great honour we have as elected councillors comes a great responsibility. That responsibility we have is to all ratepayers, all residents and business owners within the Shire, and probably more importantly to those that want to come into the Shire to do their business and conduct their way of life. And I think that's a key point that a fellow councillor made. And if we just look for a moment at the 7 shops that are in that complex, we've got F45 that's being used quite extensively. And of course, during the day, I think from about 10 o'clock to about 3 o'clock or 3:30, it's not being used. There's no car parking bays there being used. We've got the saddle shop, the equestrian shop next door, which name escapes me, but suffice to say they're in their twilight. They're about to move out. That place will become vacant. We've then got Miss McCormack's facility, which she's trying to get past, obviously, is her dance studio. Next door to that is a tattoo studio, which certainly doesn't generate that much traffic. Opposite that, we've got the Genesis, which is open 24 hours. Again, during the busy periods, that doesn't generate too much traffic. Next to that is a reticulation place, and that does get the odd tradesman and handyman that comes there various hours during the day. And then the facility next to that, which is opposite the F45, used to be Veranda, and that's been now vacant for some 6 months at least, probably longer. The office space or the facility that Miss McCormack is looking at has been vacant for a considerable amount of time. As all councillors would be aware, the last time that facility was actually used, that office space was used, was in March last year for the 2021 state election. So certainly since that time that has been vacant, and certainly months before that it was vacant, and in fact my memory escapes me to what used to be there. What I'm trying to say here, councillors, is we can have a facility that is used, that has been changed to be a health studio, to have dance classes, to have young people of the Shire suitably engaged, to have young people of the Shire put somewhere where they get some fitness, get some skills. And I tell you what, I wish I could dance. I still can't dance. And perhaps if I had dancing lessons when I was younger, I may have been able to dance properly at my wedding. But as I said, it's not about me. It's about the young people coming here. It's about a young business operator. It's about, as one of my fellow councillors said, about making the Byford Town Centre vibrant. We can have it as another empty studio or another empty floor space, which means 3 out of the 7 would be empty, or we can back a small business operator. We can back a young lady who's 30 years of age, who's shown some courage, who I would submit has been let down by the Shire previously from her move from the Byford Town Hall. We can back her. We can have the Local Government Act forefront in our minds as councillors, that responsibility that we have as councillors to listen to the community, to provide a dynamic and effective and vibrant town centre of Byford, or we can turn our back on her or ask her to pay $45,000, a cash grab at $45,000 for parking, which I submit, and no one's picked up on this, I submit is a discretionary use. Asking for cash in lieu of parking is a discretionary use, councillors. Now let's have a look at the information, the evidence, if you like, before us. Both surveys that were conducted, the end result of those surveys that were conducted is there is sufficient, and I'll say again, sufficient parking within that area for this facility. It is a kiss and drop. It is a drop-off facility. They're not going to have 35 cars parked there waiting. It is a kiss and drop. Carpooling will be done, and there'll also be students walking from nearby schools. It's not the same as a childcare facility, and I think the analogy I used was a school. And in actual fact, the example I used is West Byford Primary School, where I was there last week for an Anzac Day service, where they have some 900 students. There certainly is not a requirement for them to have 900 parking bays. Let's compare apples with apples and not apples with oranges. It is completely irresponsible and I would say completely onerous for this young lady to have to pay $45,000 for car parking bays. I would also submit that even if it's 10 car parking bays, it is too onerous. I would actually say that one parking bay is too onerous. But the reason I put that in the alternate motion is to show the goodwill of Miss McCormick, to show that she is trying to do the right thing by the residents, she's trying to do the right thing by the ratepayers, she's trying to do the right thing by the council, by the community, to offer the small money she has left over, which could probably go better to the that she's expecting, but no, she's happy as a sign of goodwill to put that towards this facility, her livelihood, her passion, so she can try and do the right thing by the Shire. Perhaps that is a sobering thought, councillors. As I said, it's her goodwill. We can talk about Bill Hicks and dropping students or children off at Bill Hicks, but that's a completely different scenario. Again, we must be responsible. We must compare apples with apples. Let's talk about Bill Hicks. It's a sporting precinct. It's in a residential area. Let's go back to what we're looking at and what we're debating here. We're looking at a facility that has car parking, and it's not just according to Councillor Rob Coles. We've got 2 surveys that were conducted that say there is sufficient parking. So let's be very, very mindful about what our role is as councillors. Let's compare apples with apples. Let's not hold a small business operator and owner and a ratepayer to ransom. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to get a cash grab off a young 30-year-old mother of 2 with another baby on the way, simply for us to put $45,000 into car parking bays, which already exist on George Street. As I said, the 5 years is pertinent because that will allow us to look at what happens in the future. It may well be that there's no requirement for extra car bays, or it may well be that there is an extra requirement for car bays, but that is something that we can look at and show some flexibility moving forwards. Just to correct some comments that have been made, the actual use of that facility at the moment is a showroom. It is going to a health studio, and I think there was misrepresentation on that previously. We can talk about reputation and, using a military term, perhaps the centre of gravity for this Shire should be our reputation. And unfortunately, councillors, that sometimes I feel that our reputation is less than ideal. This is an opportunity for us to stand shoulder to shoulder as 9 councillors, support each other, be respectful to each other, and understand this is our reputation on the line. And I think it was made very, very prudently and very eloquently by another councillor that let's support small business. Let's reinvigorate the Byford Town Centre. Let's have a vacant shop actually being used for our children. And as the Shire President said, we must do everything we can for the most vulnerable in our society, which is our children. In closing, I would commend this alternate motion. It is that balance between planning. It is the balance between what we should be doing as elected representatives, listen to the community, do the right thing by the community, by ratepayers. Notwithstanding the officer's recommendation, yes, the officers are experts. I'm certainly not an expert in planning, and I admit that nearly every meeting. But what I am is a representative of the community. What I am is someone who is damn proud to be on this Shire, someone who will fight for my residents, my ratepayers, and for people like Miss McCormick. I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Byers, you have a question?
A very technical question for the director, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Byers.
With the motion that we've got before us, the approval would run with the applicant. Am I understanding that correct? So if the applicant were to move out in 3 years' time, what implications would that have on the 5-year time limit, for example?
Thank you for the question through the chair. The approval act will actually run with the land in REM, so that
Sorry, Madam President, sorry to interject, Andrew. The clause 10.21 of the standing orders provides that once the right of reply has been taken, there can be no further discussion on the matter.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. We'll take this item to the vote. Councillor Atwell, are you for or against the motion?
Against, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Byers, for or against?
I'm against the motion, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Coles, for or against?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino, for or against the motion?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Duggan, for or against the motion?
For the motion, thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, for or against the motion?
Against the motion, thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Strange, for or against the motion?
Against the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Straughtons, for or against the motion?
For the motion, Madam President.
Thank you. I am against the motion. Motion is lost 4-5. We will go back to the foreshadow.
Sorry, Madam President. I would implore that those votes are recorded.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Madam Secretary, Miss Secretary, can we please have the votes recorded? Councillor Bias, you have another question?
Not another question, Madam President. The same question, if it could be answered this time, please.
Dr. Parker, is there an issue having this question answered now?
We've got a return to a substantive motion on the matter.
Yes. So the question that Councillor Bias had before the vote was taken on the alternate motion, is he able to have that question answered by the director now?
So what we should actually have is a motion before the council. So there was a foreshadowed motion previously.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. We have had a foreshadowed motion put forward by Councillor Singh with the change to condition C, which would now read 37,500 instead of 45,000. Councillor Singh, you're happy to move the foreshadow. Do I have a seconder for that motion?
Sorry, Madam President. Yeah, that's fine, but we need to reduce the number of bays from 12 to 10, please. Condition
yes.
C. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Singh. Do I have a seconder for the foreshadowed amended motion put forward by Councillor Singh? Councillor Atwell. Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Councillor Straughtons, are you opposed or asking a question? Councillor Straughtons, are you opposed or are you asking a question?
Sorry, Madam President. I didn't turn the mic on. I'm asking a question. Thank you, Madam President.
Please ask.
A quick question, directing it to the Director of Infrastructure and Planning, Andrew Trossick. When you look at George Street and further north from this site in question, there is open land on the left side of George Street. And I was just wondering if we pushed some dirt into that open land, is it possible to turn that into informal parking as well, is the question.
Director?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the question. It is a Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale Road Reserve, so council could seek to allocate that as a project if it so wished.
If I can, just to gain clarification, Councillor Straughtons here. I guess more my question is there enough area? I can't recall if that fence along the railway line closes in closer to the George Street or stays the same distance as it is where the informal parking is already existing?
Bear with me one moment. Looking at that area in question through you, Madam President, looking through that area in question, it is actually coincides with the portion of land along George Street, which the now approved swimming centre, play centre and gym to the north of this development is going to place their payment in lieu of car parking bays. So that portion of George Street Road Reserve would be utilised by the already approved plans, which show further car parking being provided to deal with the parking requirements on numbers 811 and 813. Sorry, numbers 813 and 815 Southwest Highway, which is on the north side of this development site.
Councillor Strellin's here. Thank you for the clarification.
Madam President, it's probably an opportunity for Councillor Bias to have his question answered now.
I would like it answered if possible.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Martin. I was going to move to Councillor Bias now. Councillor Bias, would you like to re-ask your question?
It's just in relation to who the approval belongs to. Is it with the applicant or does it run with the land?
Director?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Madam President, it would run with the land as opposed to a particular person.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Councillor Straughtons, can you please take your hand down if you have no further questions? Councillor Coles, do you have a question?
Madam President, I've got plenty of questions, but in relation to this, I don't support this alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Duggan, do you have a question?
No, sorry, my hand is up to oppose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Councillor D'Agostino, do you have a question?
Madam President, following along the same theme as Councillor Bias, I'm just trying to drill down a little deeper on this issue of where who the approval runs with. Could I ask the director to clarify if it's possible in a situation such as this to propose some wording so that the approval did run with the proponent?
Are you proposing an amendment, Councillor D'Agostino?
I will be subject to the answer on the question. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Director?
Thank you, Madam President. We've had very similar questions come up in the past, and the position from the planning framework is that the consents do operate according to the term in rem, which means they run with the land and not with the person. And all I can offer is that the tribunal and various courts have held that as a principle of the planning framework, and that the approval would be seen to be not associated with the person per se, but with the land which the approval is granted in respect of.
Thank you, Director. And Madam President, if I could have a subsequent question, and maybe apologies, I haven't worded my question correctly. For example, in relation to Councillor Coles's proposal for the previous resolution, where it had a paragraph F, where it says the approval is valid for a period of 5 years only, commencing on, etc., would it be possible to include some wording in any proposed resolution that to make it clear that the approval is valid for a period of 5 years, or for such period as the proponent is the tenant of the particular building, would that get around the issue that you've raised of it running with the land?
Director, are you able to answer Councillor's question?
Certainly. Thank you for the question through the chair. The approval would run with as long as the land was used as a health studio, and a health studio can include, things such as fitness centres, dance studios, yoga studios, Pilates studios. So the condition or the approval that council may considering is either going to be time limited or it's not going to be time limited. I don't believe it would be an appropriate condition to make it time limited, but not time limited if the person who is currently operating or is proposed to operate continues to operate the development. It would become a difficult thing to regulate. Business structures can become complex. Businesses can be brought over. It would be a difficult thing to regulate from an enforcement perspective.
Thank you, Madam President. Perhaps if I can just seek a point of clarification with the director. I understand that the proponent is also the lessee, and so therefore we do have transparency and clarity. And what I'm trying to understand is that if we could have a maximum time period, so it'd be no longer than 5 years, but could you have a condition where you have a time period cap of say 5 years, but you also have a link there that if prior to that the proponent and their capacity as the lessee was no longer to be the lessee, then this approval would also then terminate.
Councillor D'Agostino, the director has already answered the question in a number of ways when you have asked the question, and his response has been that that is not part of how the planning works. You can't tie it to a person or a select business.
Director, is that a correct summary?
Director?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for the question again. Yes, my position would be that any approval is at law considered in rem, which is the common law terminology relating to being carried with and being specific to the property that it's allocated towards.
Thank you.
Councillor Strange, you have a question?
Thanks, Madam President. Not a question. I'm actually hoping to move an amendment to what is now the live motion.
Yes.
That would be an amendment to C, which would be altered to read as follows. Prior to the commencement of development, payment of $22,500 shall be made to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale for payment in lieu of 6 car parking bays which have not been provided on site or in a shared parking arrangement. This condition has been imposed under the requirements of Schedule 2, Clause 77H of the Planning and Development Local Schemes Regulation 2015.
And that is 6 car parking bays, Councillor Strange?
Correct, 6 bays.
Thank you. Can I please ask for a seconder for the amendment that Councillor Strange has put forward? Councillor Coles?
Unfortunately, I can't support that. I actually had a question, Madam President, but I'm happy for you to come back to me if you can find a seconder.
Thank you. Can I please, I'm asking for a seconder for the amendment that Councillor Strange has put forward.
Councillor Bias, I second.
Thank you, Councillor Bias.
Madam President, can we just wait until the Minute Secretary gets a chance to reflect it as Councillor Strange read
Yes.
it out, please? Yep. My understanding is the changes to Part C is to change the 37,500 to 22,500.
Yes.
And the number of car parking bays from 10 to 6. The rest of the clause, you can actually cut and paste it. And I think that's what you moved, Councillor Strange. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Martin.
$22,500 is the amount, and the number of bays comes down from 10 to 6. So we could take out the words amendment to condition. It's just a new, yep, perfect. Thank you.
Is there anybody opposed to the amendment before us?
Councillor Coles is opposed.
It's Councillor Duggan. I'm opposed too. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Coles, you had a question?
I did, Madam President, and I'm just trying to think the best way to do this. It seems to me unequivocally that we're now almost clutching at straws, and we've got people coming up with alternate motions. I just wonder whether it'd be prudent to defer this item. Perhaps, I don't know if there's scope or a way to do some mediation or sit down with the proponent and actually find out the best way forward mutually for both parties. I suspect, and this is only me suspecting, that 22,000, I mean, she's quite clearly said she can only afford 3,750. We can play games here and go backwards and forwards all night talking about car bays and the amount, but I just suspect that we're wasting our time and perhaps the proponent's time. Just wondering whether it'd be prudent to defer the motion with an idea or a suggestion of some mediation or some discussion between the proponent and staff.
Mr. Martin?
Madam President, I might ask some assistance from Dr. Parker actually about whether that would be a procedural motion. Dr. Parker?
Sure. So the reality is we have a live motion and an amendment to that motion. There is a procedural motion that could be moved to proceed to the next order of business. If you just bear with me just a moment, I'm just going to check the rules regarding that, because there is limitations on who can actually move that particular motion that may have actually been being met. Let me just see. Just give me one moment again. Okay, so the Standing Order section 12.1 provides that moving to the next order of business may not be moved by anyone who has moved, seconded, or spoken for or against the motion, although that motion actually has now been concluded. So I can't see a reason why they wouldn't have a procedural motion moved in this case.
So, Councillor Coles, if you wanted that to occur, you would move a motion that the council proceed to the next business.
Thanks, Mr. CEO, through the presiding member, Madam President. What does that mean, though? Then does it automatically come back at the next council meeting, or does it go off to the ether, never to be discussed again? I guess the concerns I have is delaying this as well. I mean, ideally, it'd be nice for the proponent and staff to sit down, try and work out a mutual benefit. It may well be that, you know, 3,250 is all she can afford, and then it may be that she goes to the City of Armidale, for example, or just forgets about doing this.
Councillor Coles, you have asked a question.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a time to make statements.
No, I've asked the question. What happens then if it is deferred? Thank you.
A procedural motion to defer, I will ask for a seconder and it will go straight to the vote. And we move to the next item of business.
Thanks, Madam President. Unfortunately, you haven't answered my question. My question is, if it is deferred, does it automatically come back for the May OCM? That's my question.
It depends whether you move a procedural motion to defer or whether you move another motion to defer with conditions.
Madam President, with all due respects, I'm not being cute. I'm trying to do the right thing here for the ratepayer. Perhaps someone there could give me some advice. I think
everybody here, Councillor Coles, is trying to do the right thing by the ratepayers in the Shire. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Madam President. If I may, I would like to know what my options are in terms of deferring this. Thank you.
Madam President, if the council resolved to defer the matter and move to the next item of business, we would bring it back because the council still hasn't made a decision on it. So we would bring it back at the next available opportunity that we had. But that perhaps doesn't achieve what Councillor Coles is wanting to do, which is some negotiation or mediation between the applicant. If that's what Councillor Coles wishes, then that probably isn't a procedural motion. That probably is a motion if these other motions are not successful, and maybe he could foreshadow that, and that could be then considered by the council to provide some direction to officers. If it was a procedural motion, it would just come back as exactly as it is now, without any necessarily any discussion happening with the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Councillor Coles, do you wish to move a procedural motion?
No, I don't. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. CEO. That was the advice I was after. I appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
We have a live amendment before us. It has been moved by Councillor Strange and seconded by Councillor Bias. I have had Councillor Coles and Councillor Duggan state that they would like to speak against this motion. Councillor Bias, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Madam President. To the Director, I actually put my hand up back at the start of this discussion, so the discussion has moved on a bit, but I'd still be interested in a response from the Director. I'm always conscious when we're talking about planning matters that there always seems to be some sort of statutory ticking clock or time frame that we need to meet. If this item was, irrespective of the governance mechanism that's used, deferred to a future meeting, are we subject to a statutory ticking clock that would get us into trouble? Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Director?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the question. There's no consequence of exceeding a 90-day assessment timeframe. In fact, given the complexities of this application, we are already past the maximum time period of 90 days. However, a voluminous amount of applications find themselves in that situation across Western Australia. The applicant does have the right, and did have the right on day 91, to accept a deemed refusal from the Shire for the result of there not being a determination. However, the applicant's not chosen to accept a deemed refusal. They've stayed the path and they're seeking a determination of the Shire.
Excellent. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Councillor Strange, would you like to open debate, please?
Thank you, Madam President. In the first instance, I would like to thank the Director of Development Services and his team for producing a thorough and very professional report that provides a really robust basis for the officer's recommendation, and I appreciate their work that's gone into this. I share the concerns outlined in the report, being that changes of use in this area, from uses requiring lower parking rates to those requiring higher parking rates, is likely to result in an unacceptable shortfall of parking over the longer term. But I would raise again the officers' comments on page 23 of the report, which set out clearly that officers have assessed that there is available parking along George Street and within the subject site during peak periods to serve the development at this time. Although I respect the subsequent comments made in relation to orderly and proper planning insofar as the proposed car parking shortfall is concerned, I'm also mindful of what I consider to be a number of competing objectives for the council that are documented and have been agreed to, like our commitment to being a small business friendly local government and the importance of an activated and thriving Byford town centre. Uses like the proposed dance studio contribute significantly to the vibrancy and activation of an area, and there are real negative consequences of having prolonged vacancies in town centre locations. Last year, our council committed a similar level of funding to that now sought for car parking to activate the Byford town centre using the town teams model. And while I fully support that investment, in reality, it is businesses like the one in front of us here tonight that are more likely to have a significant impact on activity levels day to day. Supporting the establishment of new businesses supports existing businesses by bringing additional foot traffic into an area. And I feel that the imposition of cash in lieu of parking, to the extent recommended by officers, will at this time be detrimental to the town centre, given the likelihood that it will result in extended vacant tenancies. Few, if any, small businesses would be in the position to meet such payments in advance of them opening their doors, which I believe should be a relevant consideration of council. That said, to remove the requirement of a financial contribution entirely or to limit it to a single bay also doesn't sit well with me. Eventually, bays will be required to be constructed, and where a proponent hasn't contributed to the costs of such construction, it will then fall to our ratepayers to foot the bill. I think that for this outcome, that is an unreasonable outcome for ratepayers, particularly considering a comment that's also been raised previously, which is that the amount being sought is already constitutes a reduction of sorts in terms of the financial contribution to actually delivering the car parking. Contrary to that, I believe that the health and wellbeing aspects of the proposal shouldn't be overlooked either. Having this type of use within our Shire's most populated suburb maximises its accessibility, and indeed places homes within walking distance and cycling distance are numerous, and they would all be benefiting from, or many of these would benefit from a proposal like this. On balance, given these factors and the fact that the F45 development application from a few years ago wasn't required to make any contribution in lieu of car parking, I arrived at what I consider to be an appropriate compromise, that of a 50% reduction to the cash in lieu contribution being sought for the proposed development. And this, I think, is a reasonable outcome that meets the needs of our ratepayers and also supports our local businesses in reducing the impost on contributions like this in them pursuing their approvals. And that is why I would commend this amendment to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Strange. Councillor Bias, would you like to speak or reserve?
I will reserve, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coles, would you like to speak against?
Yeah, very much so, Madam President. Thank you. Before I go into my points, can I just ask a question of the mover, and that is, where does the 6 bays come from? Like, why 6?
I think I did explain that in summing up, Councillor Coles, that it constitutes a 50% reduction. I believe it's a compromise position between supporting the local business and supporting the needs of ratepayers not to have to foot the entire bill for a car parking shortfall that will eventually cause problems, no doubt.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that. I apologise, Councillor, if I didn't hear that. Look, I'm not going to labour the point. I've already spoke in what I would submit in quite detail about this. I foreshadowed my comments before by saying we can sit here as councillors and go backwards and forwards and talk about money. It's really easy, councillors, for us to talk about money when it's not our money. This is a small business owner, a young lady that we can talk about figures easily and just splurt them out, but this is a significant amount of money for her. It's quite clear that the amount of money that she's offered to pay is $3,750. So whilst we're heading in the right direction, we're still, what's that, $19,000-ish dollars more than what she can afford. I hear the comments that have been made. The salient point, ladies and gentlemen, that's been made tonight is, what do we want? Do we want a town centre that has vacant premises? And I will make the same comments again. The veranda shop, which is the one opposite F45, is vacant, has been vacant for at least 6 months. I should have probably spoken to Ray White and found out how long it had been vacant for. Saddle Plus, and I've managed to find the name of that. Saddle Plus is about to become vacant. Certainly, and I'm speaking in good faith here, my understanding is that it hasn't had another tenant, so Saddle Plus will move out, that'll be vacant. Quite simply, if this gets past, is $22,500, the proponent won't be able to afford that. That will remain vacant. We've got the tattoo store, or the studio, which I would imagine, I actually don't know that the classification of that, whether that would be a showroom or a health studio. Perhaps we could get some clarification on that. Then we've got the Genesis and the Hugel and Hoyle, or the reticulation place. So really all we'll have is, of 7 units, 2 will be health studios, which is Genesis and F45, and a reticulation shop. Is that what we want to leave our legacy as? Is that the reputation we as councils want to have? Do we want to be that onerous, that unsupportive, that irresponsible to ratepayers and small business owners, that we're going to force them to pay money that they don't have? Councillors, I can quite easily see what's going to happen here. We're in uncertain times. We're in the midst of a federal election. We can talk about COVID. We can talk about issues with the economy at the moment. But you know what? Let's do what we can do. Let's control what we can control. Let's step up. Let's be counted. Let's think about the Local Government Act and what our job is as elected representatives. And let's actually support a young mum who's trying to do the right thing by the community, who's trying to engage with the most vulnerable people in our society, our children, get them into an area that is healthy, to teach them a lifelong skill of dancing, to improve their mental health, to improve their well-being. Let's stand up and let's be counted. If this motion is lost, I would foreshadow a new motion where the applicant comes and meets with the Shire staff and work out a suitable way forward in terms of whether it's a payment plan or something else to the agreement or the satisfaction of both the Shire and the proponent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for the motion?
Madam President, I'd like to speak for the motion.
Yes, Councillor Strottles.
Listening carefully to all this, it seems that if we want to be having bitumised parking in our semi-rural environment, then this is a good opportunity to try and achieve that. Although I do hear what the other councillors have said, that doors banging is to squeeze in extra car parks is probably not ideal. It's unfortunate that for all this discussion, that actually it couldn't be communicated that extra car parking actually will be achieved from all the money. So I would like to come up with an argument of how this extra money being asked for will provide extra parking, because the more parking we could get, the better. But listening carefully, I don't see how how asking for any extra money is going to get the parking. So that's unfortunate, because I would have liked to have spoken to how great that is that we're achieving that. I also would have liked to have spoken to how, it's important to put obstacles in place, because the neighbours have come up with lots of objections to this business, but unfortunately the neighbours haven't come up with any objections, and they're the nearest beneficiaries. And the best I can say is that yes, there probably will be some extra congestion, and sometimes that's a good problem to have. We need those sorts of problems: busy, vibrant, extra congestion. But unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen as well, because of the obstacles put in place. So as much as I'm trying to speak for the motion, I guess I'm struggling. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strawton. Councillor Duggan, you wish to speak against the motion?
Thanks, Madam President. Further to what I've said previously, I guess the first thing that strikes me is that it strikes me that we are asking the proponent to pay for errors that have actually been made by the council in the past. It was the council that approved the original building with only 4 bays per space for each showroom, without foresight that these spaces would perhaps not be used just as showrooms, but would actually be used for other means. It's also the council that approved the other health studio that's in the building there, the adult health facility, and that was allowed with 20 per class, and this was only in 2018, but with no parking conditions put on it. And yet, as I stated before, those bays will be used for an entire hour while the people are in their class. And I guess it gets me to precedence, which is if we can, in the past, approve a health studio that we know will have 20 people in a class that are adults that are more likely to drive there rather than walk from school, with no parking conditions. We can't play favourites with approvals. That's the whole point of precedence. Precedence is saying, this is what we've set. This is what we're saying is appropriate. So now we're changing that. To me, these car parking bays will end up being used, ironically, more likely by the people at the F45 or the Genesis, because they will park there for a longer amount of time, meaning that they're not available for a kiss and drop, which is what the proponent is putting as part of her proposal. So we have a proponent who is being requested to pay for council's decisions on parking in the past. It's car parking that is on public land, is car parking that is already there. It is not going to be adding a significant number of bays for the money, whether it is $45,000 or whether it's $22,500. For this applicant, it's been made perfectly clear that the most money she could put together is $3,750. So it doesn't matter if we ask her for $22,500, $45,000 or $1 million. If she can't put that money together, she will take her business out of our shire and we will end up with yet another empty shop front. And as Councillor Strange alluded to, the amount of money we spend trying to evoke what will be a vibrant town centre is so much more than this money. I can't see why, when council have made these decisions in the past regarding the parking, council can't then be responsible. Council being, I understand, council being ratepayers, but when council is putting so much money into these other areas to try and increase the vibrancy of the new town centre, and yet we're willing to lose a very, very important business in our shire at that very spot for this money. It just doesn't make sense to me. And like I said, for the precedents, I just can't be a party to it when we start going against precedents. It's just, it's playing favourites with approvals, and I have a real problem with that. Thanks so much.
Councillor Duggan, I have some questions for the comments you have just made. You've made a comment saying that we are playing favourites with approvals. Can you please clarify what you mean by that?
Certainly, thanks, Madam President. The whole point of precedents is that it is making, I see it as little semi-bylaws. We're saying if we have this situation, this is how we're going to treat that situation and that applicant. So we have got an applicant in exactly the same centre who has requested in February 2018 approval for a health studio, same thing, but an adult studio, which, as I've said, is already actually has got more requirements on those parking bays. And yet there was no parking conditions attached to that approval. And so now, you know, a few years later, we are looking at something that will require less use of those bays, but we're putting parking conditions on it. That, to me, that's a whole point why we use precedents. That's why in every state of law they use precedents, because it's saying, well, this is what we're saying is appropriate. This is what we use as a baseline so that all decisions are made, and they're made fairly, and they're made without favour. So that is where they're saying that we are playing favourites, because we are not doing this fairly and without favour if we are not looking at precedents. I hope that explains it a little clearer.
So, Councillor Duggan, the council approval that was given in 2018 is exactly the same as this approval that is being requested tonight?
I actually think that the one from 2018, like I say, had actually more requirement on the parking conditions. There is only 20 in a class compared to 35. However, those 20, all of them are more likely to drive. I know from when my kids were little, I would be working. Sometimes another parent would take my daughter down and I would do the pickup. So there'd be a lot more sharing of the lifts.
So, Duggan, I didn't ask what you were doing with your daughter when she did dance classes. I asked the question of whether the 2018 approval as given by council was exactly the same as the approval requested this evening.
Certainly, Madam President, and I think that as part of answering that, I was trying to explain that, you know, this has got to do with the car parking conditions and the adult studio.
So was the approval given in 2018 exactly the same as the approval requested this evening?
I think that this approval this evening has got less requirement for parking, and yet it has been asked for parking conditions compared to the one from 2018. So I think we're actually doing more of a disservice than if they were apples for apples.
You haven't answered the question I have asked of you. Is the approval granted in 2018 exactly the same as the approval requested this evening?
I think that they're incredibly similar.
Thank you. Director, I have some questions for you. We've heard a lot of debate on this item this evening. We've started out at a point of $45,000 because in the report we are told that we have a shortfall of 12 car parking bays. Am I correct in my understanding that $45,000 will build 6 car parking bays? If this amendment before us is supported, $22,500 will build 3 car parking bays. $7,500 will build 1 bay, and in the motion that was lost, $3,750 would build half a car parking bay.
Thank you, Madam President. Based on the changes to the local planning framework, the 50% reduction in calculation for a car parking bay would indeed be those numbers that you've just voiced to everyone.
Thank you. And my understanding is correct, then with a shortfall of parking within a commercial precinct within our town centre, if it is not paid for by the landowner or the occupants of those buildings, then it is the ratepayers that will pay for the cost of that car parking shortfall.
Thank you, Madam President. If a car parking issue became prevalent and it was expressed to council and council sought to address the car parking issue by undertaking additional car parking in the area, then council would need to allocate those funds through the normal process of budget via the municipal fund.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino, do you have a question?
Madam President, just to clarify that, I think you made a good point. So if there was a shortage of parking, there's no compulsion on the Shire, sorry, director, addressing this to the director, there's no compulsion on the Shire to expend any ratepayer funds, and it could be that the landlords, the tenants, the owners of in the vicinity would, in the first instance, have to pay for any additional car parking. Is that correct?
Director?
Thank you for the question through the chair. I don't think I could approach, or the Shire could just merely approach local businesses seeking a voluntary contribution to car parking. In fact, my usual experience is that if a car parking issue arose, that they would be, on the flip side, speaking with the Shire, seeking to have car parking fixed in inverted commas. So yeah, I'm not familiar with the Shire essentially being able to seek monies voluntarily from existing businesses to generally increase parking in a area which currently has parking issues.
Thanks, Director. Madam President, just a supplemental question. So, Director, in your experience, and particularly in your time in the Shire, has the Shire had to expend any additional monies to increase car parking in existing shopping precincts?
Director?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, nothing comes immediately to mind as to increasing parking in shopping precincts since I've been here, no.
Thank you.
Councillor Stroughton, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, a question to Andrew Trosick, Director of Planning Infrastructure. When we're here all talking about building car parking, and aren't we really talking about turning informal parking into formal parking? So there's actually no additional parking spaces being created? Is that the actual fact that's happening here, please?
Director?
Thank you for the question through the chair. I guess perspective with we call things informal parking, it's probably a better term to actually not refer them to as parking, because our parking standard is for parking to be sealed and drained within the town centre, as opposed to I guess finding one's way onto the verge and classifying that as parking.
If I could, Madam President, just an additional question. Then, Andrew, can you please help me understand, how did we determine that those people attending this proposed new business wouldn't like to be parking on the informal parking and really need and must have expensive bitumised parking?
Thank you for the
Correct.
question. Oh, sorry, Madam President.
Director, you're right to go.
Yep. Thank you for the question. I think that's why we adopt standards for safe and accessible car parking to avoid inadequate or insufficient car parking that can create, an issue, a safety issue, an asset maintenance issue, and the like. So informal parking shouldn't be confused with appropriate proper parking.
If I can, then one last question, please, Madam President. So, Andrew, the Director of Infrastructure and Planning, what you're saying is what I'm referring to as an informal parking that's all along George Street. You're saying that it's not safe and the council is at risk for having it there and we ought to be shutting it down instead of allowing people to park there?
Director?
Thank you for the question through the chair. No, I don't think I'm saying that. I think I'm saying it's not formal car parking.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other councillor that would like to speak for the motion?
Madam President, I'll exercise my right of my reserved comments, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Bias.
I'd just like to say that this is an issue of balance, and I listened very closely to Councillor Stroughton's debate, and I can hear the conflict in Councillor Stroughton's voice. I share it. Ultimately, the bays will be needed, and they are needed, and there will be a cost to that. Does the applicant pay for the bays or our residential ratepayers? Because as we're often reminded, we don't have any money. Municipal funds are the ratepayers' funds. Will those councillors who are up for re-election next year be comfortable going to our residential ratepayers and say your rate subsidised car bays that, according to our planning framework, a commercial enterprise should have paid for? That's why this is such a complex matter. It's an issue of balance. Let's find the common ground that I spoke of earlier. Let's find the balance where we're giving a small business the opportunity to set up, grow and enjoy the fruits of their labour while ensuring that our residential ratepayers don't pick up the full bill. I absolutely commend Councillor Strange for striving to find the balance on this challenging issue. I thank everyone who's contributed to the debate. It has been a long debate and it's still going, but it has been respectful, and I would just ask that we all focus on that question of why we're here, that finding that common ground, and I think that this amendment does achieve that. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there any councillor that'd like to speak against the motion?
Madam President, I would if I could.
Councillor D'Agostino.
Thank you. And thank you to Councillor Coles for rectifying the Saddles Plus, and note that they are a business, an iconic equestrian business that's been with our Shire for a long time. And as Councillor Coles, I think, has alluded to, a lot of these tenancies are now struggling in that area and vacant. And I suppose I look back to the fact that there was only one objection on this particular application. It didn't even relate to the time period that this business will operate in. And perhaps but for that one unrelated objection, we wouldn't be having this discussion, which I think isn't is a very relevant factor. And for me, this proposal, the motion as it stands, doesn't. Of course, it's a movement in the right direction, but we still doesn't pass the pub test. And this is discretionary, and I really think we've got to look at what's equitable. We need to consider what's the right thing to do here. How do we exercise our discretion? What is equitable? And I think when you consider the equity, you don't look to there is no direct immediate benefit for this precinct. There's no new car parks that will be going created in 2 months' time or 3 months' time. I struggle myself personally with the whole nebulous nature of this money going into precinct or into trust and effectively possibly being hopefully spent down the track. So there's that nebulous nature of it all. And really, as I think someone alluded to earlier, it's really the landlord that might benefit from this more than the tenant. And the real people here that are going to suffer will be the patrons of this business and the business owner and perhaps our community. So I really do struggle. You know, I understand it's a movement in the right direction, but I just feel that we're still a long way from where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor D'Agostino. Is there any more councillors that would like to speak for the motion? We'll take the motion to the vote. The motion before us is the amendment to change the figure from 37,500 to 22,500 and the number of bays from 10 to 6 bays. Councillor Atwell, are you for or against the amendment?
I guess I'm for it, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Biased, for or against the amendment?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Coles, for or against?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor D'Agostino, for or against the amendment?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Duggan, for or against the amendment?
I'm against, thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, for or against the amendment?
Against, thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Strange, for or against?
For the amendment, Madam President.
Thank you. Councillor Strawtons, for or against?
For. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. I am also for the amendment. Motion is carried 5-4. The substantive motion now reverts to item C, reading prior to the commencement of development, payment of 22,500 shall be made to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale for payment in lieu of 6 car parking bays which have not been provided on site or in a shared parking arrangement. This condition has been imposed under the requirements of Schedule 2, Clause 77H of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015.
Madam President, my apologies. Madam President, sorry, could I ask that those votes be recorded, please?
Minute Secretary, can we please record the votes for the amendment, please?
Thanks very much, Madam President. That was Councillor Duggan requesting, thanks.
Councillor Singh, you have a question?
I would like to get the reason for the amendment, please.
There is no reason for amendments. It's covered as part of the debate. Thank you, Minute Secretary. We'll return to the substantive motion. We have a mover in Councillor Singh and a seconder in Councillor Atwell. Councillor Coles, you have indicated you wanted to speak against. Councillor Duggan, you've indicated you wanted to speak against the motion. Councillor Singh, would you please open debate?
Thank you, Madam President. As I spoke earlier, I think there are quite a few points that we have covered and the debate is going too long. I don't want to take too much time. Again, I'll reinstate my comments. Parking is the most precious issue in every local government these days. Look at Karrinyup Shopping Centre, and it's a big shopping centre. People are parking on verges, footpaths, and illegal parking. So I don't want to get same situation here, so that the Shire will cope with more and more complaints in the future. We have to abide by a town planning scheme, which we have a formula, and according to the area that's been calculated, precisely after the email received on 8th of April from the Director Development Services. The amended condition is 250 into 15 into 10, which is 37,500. Vehicle movements, again, there's about 35 students in the class. I'm saying there will be around about 35 vehicles coming in and 35 vehicles going out, although it's a kiss and drop, but average out to 5 minutes per parking. You're looking at a substantial number of minutes a vehicle is staying in the parking. It's going to be increased foot traffic. We have to look for safety and security of the pedestrians. We are opening the doors for other businesses, and which we're putting the Shire reputation on risk. I have concerns, like I know it's a small business, she can't afford. If you look at the income generating on this from this business is quite substantiative. I think she can afford, the business can afford the funds for the parking bays. I think the next one is the decision, we will change the decision of cash in lieu if this is not a small business or a big business like a multi-million dollar. I know it's you can't compare apples with apples, but what I'm trying to say is we have to be consistent. Doesn't matter if it's a small business or a big entity. We have town planning scheme. We have to abide by that. I know they say it's not easy to afford that money, but there are some small business grants which the proponent can apply in the future, which will help her to run the business successfully. I think I heard the comments of the cash grab, which we are not doing. This is not a cash grabbing. It's we are going by the town planning scheme, and it's a technical term involved in getting those parking bays measured up. What's the requirement for the business? I think I said it's a health studio. No, it's not a health studio. Sorry for that. I apologize. So it's a showroom 2, a dance studio, which I can, the use is changing. So basically to me is if we are, what we are trying to say is instead of, it's not a house, it's a commercial business now. So the means of the business is totally changing. So we have to get it commercially rated and apply the town planning scheme appropriately. I think past and future, which is I think we have discussed already. Whatever we have approved in 2018 is not similar to what we are approving today. I think in 5 years' time there might be a different agenda come to the council meeting. There may be a multi-million-dollar developer come in here and knock everything, put a hotel or anything else. So we have to consider what our future needs are for these small businesses. So I will stick to my original motion, and that's it. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Atwell, would you like to speak or reserve?
I think I'm going to find it rather difficult to speak to it, seeing as I've just voted for the other motion, so I'll reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Coles, would you like to speak against the motion?
Yeah, I will, for the 4th time, I think it is now. As I said earlier, we have a duty as elected ratepayers to do the right thing by the residents and the community and small business operators. I still can't reconcile in my mind why we would get a small business operator to spend this amount of money. 22,500 is a lot better than the initial 45,000, but we're still not there. And I guess I need to correct one thing that's been mentioned. This operator made $20,000 in their first year. $20,000. Now, objectively, they'll make more in their second year, and with more students, obviously they'll get more revenue. But to turn around and say that a small business operator can afford this amount of money, I think is irresponsible. It's inaccurate, and it's not fair. The key thing, I guess, that I'll say again is that there is 2 parking surveys that have been done, one during the school holidays, one another period of time. Both of those surveys reflect that there are enough car parking bays. There are enough car parking bays, and I'm quite confident in my own reflection and my own assessment to put on the record that this is a cash grab. Whether it's $45,000 or that's $22,500, this is a cash grab. I wonder whether there's any actual certainty that that money will go into car parking bays, or whether those funds will go into the municipal funds and be used for another process or another purpose in the Shire. We've got to remember, councillors, that with the Byford Rail coming in, this whole area will be looked at in terms of parking, in terms of the train station, in terms of the whole infrastructure. Let's keep our powder dry. Let's be relevant, responsible, and do the right thing by our community and by ratepayers. We've heard it before. It's quite interesting, actually, and I would implore councillors to go back and listen to the recording of this meeting, because we've all said the same thing. We want to have a vitalised town centre. We want to have a reason for people to come to Byford, a reason for mum and dad to drop little Johnny off at Rise Dance Studio, or little Jenny, as the case may be, perhaps park at the Dome and have a meal, have a coffee, socialise at Dome, make the area lively, attract businesses, attract people, and heaven forbid, maybe even attract people from outside the Shire, give them a reason to come to our Shire. As I said, it's a great honour to be a councillor, particularly pleased and proud, and my hard work has been recognised by my re-election, and there may well be another election in the next couple of months, and if that is the case, I will certainly be proud to stand again, because it's not about me, it's not about the other 8 councillors, it's not about the directors or the CEO, it's about our community, it's about our small businesses, and it's about us doing the right thing. As I said, I would implore all councillors to listen to this recording when it comes available on Friday, and just reflect upon the decisions that you're making tonight and what this means for a small business in our area. I cannot and will not support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Strange.
Thanks, Madam President. I will keep it short. I disagree wholeheartedly that this motion before us is a cash grab. There are requirements for the Shire to spend any money collected as cash in lieu on the creation of car parking spaces within a reasonable time period. In my consideration of this application, I have spoken with the Director of Development Services, who has reassured me that we would indeed be in the position to construct any bays that we collect funds for within an 18-month period. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strange. Councillor Duggan, you'd like to speak against?
Thanks, Madam President. Just an additional note that I hadn't actually mentioned until now. There's been a number of times where it's been referred to that if the proponent, the applicant, doesn't pay for this parking, well, then that money has to come from the ratepayer's purse. And I'm just as sensitive as the other councillors to how important we want that ratepayers' money to be spent, which is why I actually made reference before about the money that we spend on advertising our Byford town precinct, and this money that we're looking at here, if we're paying for it for parking, is it not just another way that we're supporting that Byford town precinct? Because ultimately, who will be using these bays? It is the ratepayers who will be using these bays, and it is ratepayers that will be using it for all the businesses there. So the way I see it at the moment is we're looking at upgrading a parking area from being a gravel sort of area to a bitumenized area, and we're expecting one person who happens to be the proponent that's come forward today to put money towards that when no other businesses are. It just doesn't sit comfortably with me, and so that's why I just can't support this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody else that would like to speak for the motion? Councillor Strange, you have a question?
Sorry, technical difficulties there. I just wanted to clarify with the director that I do believe that we collected cash in lieu for car parking for that other gym slash swimming pool that is nearby this site. Can I assume that the money we collected as part of that application would be used in conjunction with this contribution to create a parking area? Is that a reasonable understanding?
Director?
Thank you for the question. Not either fortunately or unfortunately, but that approval occurred prior to the changes in the deemed provisions. So that allowed us to impose a condition whereby the 26 bays, they are short. They are actually constructing at their entire cost, the full 26 bays within the George Street Road Reserve. If we encountered that same application today, we would be required to follow a path similar to the path we followed here, and just noting those points about the actual calculation that actually discounts the value of the contribution.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Councillor Coles, you have a question?
Sorry, Madam President, it's just been answered then by the director. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, would you like to close, please?
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be very short. I think there's enough debate on this topic. So as we spoke, I think we have knocked back other businesses due to parking issues. The cost of the parking bays has to be coped by the ratepayers, which this proponent is a ratepayer as well. I think she might be aware of that. Parking issues, again, I'll highlight parking issues is the major concern for every shire. Look at the other shires or towns. Even in the city, when there is a change of use of business, there is parking restrictions being applied to every commercial business, and according to the town planning scheme available. Can understand the tenant's financial condition, but if you look at the income generation from this business is quite substantiative, and then it's can be affordable. Again, traffic movement is quite a huge due to number of students in the class, and it's a 7 days business, Monday to Friday, about roughly 5 classes, weekend 3 to 4 classes. Approving this, I think we opening doors to other businesses to question Shire's reputation. And if the decision will be changed if this is not a small business or a big entity. We are reducing the cost, and I think it's sort of a mutual agreement. I don't know whether the further mediation will be required. We have to look for safety and security of the pedestrians. We don't want to have illegal parking then barricaded by other businesses and illegal parking complaints to the Shire. So we have to take all the future needs and the issues into account now so that we can avoid that to reduce Shire's workload in the future. I think that's all I can comment. Thanks for the time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Councillor Atwell, are you for or against the motion?
Can you indulge me just for a second? I've got totally confused here. We have, what has?
The motion before us is the substantive motion, the officer's recommendation that has been amended so that condition C reads, prior to the commencement of development, payment of $22,500 shall be made to the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale for payment in lieu of 6 car parking bays which have not been provided on site or in a shared parking arrangement. This condition has been imposed under the requirements of Schedule 2, Clause 77H of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulation 2015.
Thank you for that. For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Biased, for or against the motion?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Coles,
Against.
for or against? Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor D'Agostino, for or against?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Duggan, for or against?
Against, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Singh, for or against?
For the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Strange?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Straughtons?
Against the motion, Madam President.
Thank you. I am for the motion. Motion is carried 5-4. Thank you, councillors.
Madam President, we will need a reason for the minutes from Councillor Singh for the difference in the officer recommendation, which I understand and appreciate incorporates the amendment that Councillor Strange moved, but we'll need a reason for the difference of the officer recommendation. Please.
Thank you, Paul.
Councillor
Sorry.
Singh, if you would like, Councillor Strange has her hand up. She will most likely help you with the reason for the change if you wish.
Yes, certainly, that's not a problem. So my reason was reduction in use, reduction in commercial use area by the tenancy. Happy to amend as Councillor Strange wants.
I would just offer potentially a reason to acknowledge the council's competing priorities. In the areas of proper planning, sorry, that should be orderly and proper planning. And supporting local small businesses and activation of the Byford Town Centre.
Councillor Singh, are you happy with that? Do you want to?
Yes, no issues. Thank you, Paul. Thanks, Madam President. Thanks, Lauren. Councillor Strange, sorry.
Thank you, councillors. Councillor Coles, you have a question?
Not a question, Madam President, but I'm sure you can foreshadow what I'm about to say. I would ask that the votes are recorded.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Strange, do you have a question?
Sorry, Madam President, forgot to put my hand down.
Thank you. Thank you, Minute Secretary. Item 10.1.3, final approval for shared use agreement, Shire of Serpentine, Jarrahdale and Court Grammar School.
Madam President, Councillor Coles has declared a financial interest, as being written on the screen there, and also Councillor D'Agostino has declared a proximity interest. So they'll need to leave the meeting, and we can reconnect them and invite them back in and message them to come back in when council has considered this item.
Thank you.
Okay, see you later.
Dr. Parker, can you please confirm that both Councillor Coles and Councillor D'Agostino have left the meeting?
I can confirm that, Madam President. A reference to the number in the top of the screen there refers to +2, where previously it was +4.
Thank you very much.
Madam President, before, as you've read the item out, before the council considers the matter, I would just like to correct the officer recommendation in part 1B, when the Minute Secretary gets a chance to get there. The last dot point, we need to change the word summer to winter weekends. So there's 4 dot points, and the last two should be, first two should be summer, and the last two should be winter.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I do actually have that noted in my agenda. And the Minute Secretary has already done it. Thank you. Can I please have a mover for the motion before us, please? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Dr. Parker, can we please ask Councillor Coles and Councillor D'Agostino to re-attend the meeting, please?
I will indeed, yes. Just give me one moment. So both councillors should now be rejoined the meeting.
Yep, I'm here.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor
Coles,
D'Agostino. Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillors, the council has resolved and adopted the officer's recommendation unanimously. Item 10.1.4, Binjel Brook Reserve Management Plan, adoption of revised plan. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Singh.
Sorry, Madam President, can I please amend condition 3 on this, if possible? Thank you.
Condition 3.
Add a condition, next amendment, sorry.
Yes, Councillor Singh.
Okay, so I would like to add, because I think in the PCF Q&A I asked the question how often this get revised. Can we add a condition if the Director Development Services can help me for the wording to be revised? Reserve management plan to be revised every 5 years. Is that the right wording, Director? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. It might be something like notes the submission, adopts the revised, requests the Rubindal Brook Reserve Management Plan be reviewed after 5 years.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Singh?
Yes, Paul and Ms. CEO. Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Do I have a seconder for the amended motion put forward by Councillor Singh? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously.
And Councillor Singh, we will need a reason for the difference in the officer recommendation. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but have you got a reason we can include in the minutes, please?
Thank you, CEO. I think it's maybe the correct wording if the Director can help me. To be consistent with the cost, which is I think 4,000 per revision. So basically, so we can have some sort of a budget allocated for this revision of the management plan. So the right wording to be consistent with the cost, and the cost to be included in including in the budget. Yeah, that should do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10.1.5, Whitby Town Estate Local Development Plan number 18. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.2, Infrastructure Services Reports. 10.2.1, Council consent to land Council consent to land dictation Thomas Road and Nicholson Road intersection in Oakford. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Bias. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3, Corporate Services Reports. 10.3.1, Monthly Financial Report, February 2022. Can I please have a mover for this motion?
Yeah, Councillor Coles is happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Councillor Singh, do you have a question?
Not opposing, just thanks to Director of Corporate Services to having the format change to bullet points rather than the paragraphs. Thank you for the work done on this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Singh. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.3.2, in-person council and committee meetings. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Councillor Coles? Are you opposed or do you have a question?
No, neither, Madam President. I was actually going to support it, second it, but I missed the vote.
Thank you.
I'll take my hand down.
Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.4, community and organisational development reports. 10.4.1, local emergency management committee information report. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.4.2, Major Event Grant Scheme 2021-2022 endorsement of acquittals. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Singh. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.4.3, Mounts Loop Master Plan. Can I please have a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Duggan. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Strange. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.5, Executive Services Reports. 10.5.1, consideration of motions carried at the electors' special meeting held on Tuesday, the 8th of March 2022. Can I please have a mover?
Councillor Coles is happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Can I please have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Atwell. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.5.2, consideration of motions carried at the annual general electors meeting. Consideration of motions carried at the annual general meeting of electors held on Wednesday, the 16th of March 2022. Councillor Coles, are you happy to move?
I am. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Duggan, are you happy to second?
Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you. Is there anybody opposed to this motion? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 10.6 is confidential reports, of which there is nil. Item 11 is urgent business, of which there is nil. Item 12 is councillor questions, of which notice has been given, which is nil. Brings us to meeting closure, and I declare this meeting closed at 10:25 p.m. Thank you all for your attendance, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.